So welcome along to the online Dublin Buddhist Centre and to Culture Night. So far this evening, we've had a couple of sessions of meditation. So Vajrashura has taught the mindfulness of breathing, and we've just had Maitrikaya doing the metta bhavana, the development of love and kindness meditation. So this session is all about fire and the void, which is a new zine, which is being produced by Alokavira, Aryapala, Sugarbha and friends. And so Alokavira, Aryapala and Sugarbha are here with us. You should be able to see the four of us on your screen. And those three are the creative force and the contributors also to the zine. And happily, they're also friends of mine. And so the zine came out a few months ago, and my husband was also a contributor. So I really wanted to hear more and thought others might like to as well. And it seemed a perfect thing to have on Culture Night. So what I'm going to do is just basically chat to the lads about the zine, about what it's about and how it came into being. And so I'm going to talk to Alokavira first, and then Sugarbha, and then Aryapala. And we'll see a few images, we'll see some video, and at the end we'll come together again. So my first guest is Alokavira. So welcome to Alokavira. He is currently in Cheltenham, I believe. Originally from Essen in Germany, he encountered the Triratna Buddhist community in the late 1990s. He moved to the UK to pursue ordination and was ordained into the Triratna Buddhist order in 2004 and given the name Alokavira, which means hero of light. And Alokavira works as a documentary photographer and is a lecturer in photography within Birmingham City University's School of Visual Communication. So I remember meeting you, Alokavira, back in 2000. And actually you took a few photos of that encounter. And I remember when I first met you, I remember your tattoos, and I remember talking to you about the fact you're on the punk scene, I believe in Berlin, is that right?
No, in Essen and all over Germany. Yeah, punk, hardcore scene. Yeah.
So you're playing hardcore punk in a band?
Yeah, a few vegan militia, eco rage, and the last one was called anthropophobia.
Say that again?
Anthropophobia, so anthro, human, and phobia, so the fear of humans. Not in the psychological sense, but more in the what the world has to fear.
Wow. And I remember you were involved in some radical, it was kind of like, the phrase I had in my mind was kind of radical veganism, breaking into places where horrible things happen to animals.
It's recorded, no, anti-fascist street violence, hunt sabotage, that kind of stuff, yeah.
And is that where the idea of the zine kind of came from that scene that you were on at that time?
Well, you know, zines in a way have a strong origin in that kind of field, punk music. Well, there are some football zines as well, but I suppose for all of us, or those of us involved in the Born of Fire and the Void zine, that is probably more our background. The idea of it came actually from, in a way, Aryapala living and working at Padmaloka, Lokeshwara being there as a chair at the time, and May having been their designer, I don't know for how many years now. And we wanted to move away from pebbles and blossoms and stuff like that, and wanted to do something that actually shows the radical offering the Dharma gives to those that actually are daring to take it on. And back then we thought, Aryapala went out, Lokeshwara asked him to get some comics actually. And we thought to take the program in a different direction. And there was a kind of classic 2012 with a mountaineer on. We wanted to put some zine stuff in there, and it sort of was very limited. And it took, well, 8 years for the fire to be inflamed and or set alight. And so we spoke about it a few times.
Yeah, what brought that about? You know, how did it come to pass that you know the zine came into being? Because it felt like the way you were talking about it when I was talking to you earlier and things that I'd read, it had quite a long gestation period. So what was the thing?
Well, it did. You know, actually, Aryapala, Sugarbha and I had an attempt once to go, let's do it. And a friend of ours, Akasa Jyoti, who used to do the design for Adhisthana, she spoke with Aryapala and said, by the way, what is happening with that zine, Aryapala? And he went to me and said, she asked that. And I said, well, it was, you know, during lockdown.
Yeah.
And we went, come on, let's go for it. And
yeah.
I don't know, it was 2 months and we had it published. So, yeah.
And what's been the initial response to the zine? Because I know it's been distributed quite broadly. You were telling me that. It has.
I mean, a breath of fresh air, I've heard that a few times. That came from London, Patmaloka, Berlin, people said that. Very positive. People responded to the energy, responded to the edge that it offers. There were a few critical ones. Somebody in Berlin said, what if children see this? Yeah, so a bit of a shock reaction, which I suppose, yeah, great, I like it.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting because when I was looking at the video, which I'll show a little bit later on, that I think Aryapala made, and it's funny, as I was watching it, I noticed that I was aware of how other people might respond to it. And I realized how, I run a Buddhist center with some friends, and you do get quite keyed into what other people will think about what you're producing. So when I first saw the zine, I was really just excited about the fact there was a new kind of form of expression, and that would offer possibilities just to put things in a different way and say things in a different way, and actually say maybe you can't say in other ways.
Well, I think there was a bit like, you have to check everything. There seem to be somewhat centralized perspectives. You can't say this, you can't say that. And it is a bit like, well, that's what we like. That's our sense of humor.
Yeah.
There's a tantric tradition that steers in realms that are not comfortable. And in a way, we wanted to dip into that visually, and also sort of in terms of what everybody in the written form has contributed, or Paraga with his illustrations.
Yeah.
So Western take on a tantric path.
Yeah, but that's one of the most striking things about, not actually right from the beginning with that first Patmaloka program that you did in that new way, was that the kind of mashup of traditional images from tantric Buddhism and also images from sort of Western arena, kind of coming together in a new way. Maybe what I could do is actually just show a couple of images from the zine, and maybe you could just talk us through them a little bit, say what they're about.
Yeah.
So you should be able to see that now. Can you see that, Alokavira?
Yeah.
So that's the cover. So you've got you've got Born of Fire and the Void. We've got an issue number 1, and you've got the flames in the background, and you've got this kind of a very unusual symbol behind.
Well, it's actually a very traditional symbol of the 3 jewels.
Right.
So I have to be careful what I do with my fingers. So these 3 bits are actually the jewels, and then you have the bit there, which is a vajra, and then the circle often has a dharma chakra in it. Right. I've seen it in the East, and I've seen it online actually, but it's a very ancient depiction of the 3 jewels.
So that was one of the things that struck me about the zine, was it's both quite sort of radical in expression, but very traditional in content, which I thought was brilliant, because in a way that I think what that says to me is that the Dharma is inherently kind of radical and transformative, and almost kind of disruptive. It's not an added on bit, and that's
that's so important, well, it's great. People you have to be as comfortable as you can in a way, flowers, pebbles, that's nice if you can balance your life. And we all do that, but it also needs to bite, because otherwise you don't get anywhere. I mean, you can have a nice life, but it needs to bite.
When you say bite, what does that feel like for you in your Dharma life?
Well, that in a way there's a constant reminder, maybe not to settle down. There's a constant reminder to be ethically challenged, but also have depth steering, and in a way actually not get comfortable with life, but get comfortable with life in its wholeness, including death, impermanence. And in one of the pieces I wrote how, in a way, Dharma and metal, in a way, has helped me to engage with death and have a lifelong love relationship with it. So I could face my father actually dying next to me earlier this year.
Right.
Yeah.
And you felt that the music you listened to and the practice that you've done, the Dharma practice you've done, helped you to kind of embrace the reality of that event, or?
Well, a bit in a tongue-in-cheek way, yes. Yeah. You know, I wrote in one piece, I went to the record shop where I've been going since I was 14 or so, and my friend who runs it, I picked up some records and went, well, looking at covers like this has allowed me to see my dad like this. Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the most striking kind of features, I suppose, of the, you know, death metal, black metal. I mean, the clues in the name. Even, you know, a lot of metal bands, even before that kind of thrash. I've been doing a bit of research before the thrash, black metal, all of that came along. That there was a lot of the early bands with the image of the skull, the image associated with death, were very prevalent, which seems to be a kind of a real overlap with the Dharma.
Mm.
Yeah. Maybe I could just, I'm just going to flick onto the next image. So this appears on page 2 of the zine, the inside cover. So maybe you could just tell us a little bit about what's going on in this image.
Well, in a way, that was a little bit of a play. I think it was Aryapala and I going, okay, we're going to do the zine now. And then how do we call it? And we were just jesting around over the phone and going, oh, duff-footed goat lord, or because in the Buddhist tradition, you have these duff-footed nymphs. We can't go into detail with them, but so I just thought, oh, let's get the devil, the horned lord, put him in a kind of tanka context with the sun and the moon, give him duff-footed, duff feet, and bish bosh, some kind of wacky collage. Yeah. And so I would think that this is probably the least deep image, but it's a sort of juxtaposition, you know, with what scares people. People will go, oh, the devil. Oh. But if you look at Buddhist imagery, you have a lot of, especially tantric, you have a lot of horned beasts, and they're just the challenging forces of your mind and psyche. Yeah,
and it seems one of the really striking things that, you know, is that in the, I don't know, in the imagery and even in the lyrics with death metal and black metal and so on, a lot of images that would well, traditionally be associated with Satan and that whole sort of anti-God kind of area of, I don't know, religious life in the West. So I just wondered, like, does that have a resonance for you? That sort of, you know, the horned lord?
Well, you know, I'm not a Christian. I grew up in a Christian background, and I couldn't believe in the existence of a creator God. And when, you know, I was involved in metal, punk, politics, as I said earlier, and at some point I was looking for more depth, spiritual depth, and I couldn't turn to that tradition. So I looked for something where there was actually a path of personal development, and that was Buddhism. And I like these energies, you know, that steer in the deep, that maybe, well, that have kind of satanic energy to them. But, you know, they're actually real Satanists, and they are pretty dark people. I like the imagery, and in a way the challenge, and I think you're going to ask Sugarbha later about blasphemy. So there's this blasphemous element that certainly speaks to me, and I think it's relevant.
It seems also there's something, you keep talking about energy, there's some kind of energy involved in these images. They seem to express something that if you're not in touch with it, there's no life or no energy.
Well, you know, I think, you know, we can't go into loads of Buddhist lists, but you have the 10 fetters that you're breaking if you want to gain enlightenment. And you need a lot of energy to pursue the goal. And I found that very inspiring from the very beginning of starting to become a Buddhist, to actually become a very wholesome practitioner. And you can't leave things at the door, because otherwise you will just be will go in half gear or something. In first gear, you can't go towards enlightenment.
Yeah. So it seems like, I suppose in a way, initially it's quite surprising when you see quite dark, what would traditionally be quite dark images, because what one thinks of is like, I don't know, violence or sadism or something. But at the same time, those images have a resonance within a kind of an ethical sphere. Again, that's one of the things I found really interesting about the zine, is you've got both. You've got a very strong ethical sense, but also this exploration of what would traditionally be quite dark images.
Well, the interesting thing is, if I look, well, there are some daggers, of course, yeah, but are they violent, or is that just the response one might have because one thinks that other people would think they are violent, or one can't relate comfortably to them, so one's personal experience is potentially rejection, and then one goes, oh, it's violent. But no, it's actually transformation.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. It's something about the power of the associations of the images suggests something violent, but it needn't be like that. I mean, I think that's maybe for a lot of people when they first encounter Tibetan Buddhism, it seems a bit strange that there's all these very vigorous and seemingly aggressive images. Yeah.
What I write in one piece is actually, I found that very interesting when I went to Japan. My sense was some of the raw energies were much more integrated in some of the very fine figures, like Avalokiteshvara, for example. But there was this darker energy, which I think in Tibetan Buddhism might well be more explicit and separated.
Right. So you're saying that the refinement of the Japanese images kind of integrated that aspect. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I picked up. Yeah.
So you've got something that's very refined and very beautiful that doesn't leave anything out.
Yeah.
They're very interesting. So thanks, Alokavira. There's so much more I would have loved to have asked you. I feel like we're just beginning to delve a bit deeper. But we're going to move over to Sugarbha now. So he's going to pop up on your screen. There he is. Hello, Sugarbha. Welcome. So we can't hear you just yet, so you need to unmute yourself. Marvelous.
Hi, good to see you.
Hi. So I'll just say a little bit about Sugarbha, just because you won't necessarily know him. So one of the things to say is that Sugarbha is from Mullingar in Westmeath, and he's one of the people who first took to our movement in the early 1990s. He's one of the first Irish Triratna Buddhists, although most of his involvement with Triratna has been in the UK and now in Spain. So he was involved in the Southampton Centre for quite a long time. He also was in Cambridge and worked in a team-based right livelihood project there for a number of years. And he was ordained in 2003. And his name, Sugarbha, means he who is auspicious inside. And Sugarbha is now based in Barcelona, and he's one of the key people who's involved in establishing a new Triratna centre in Barcelona. So he's been there for a number of years now, and they have a centre there. There's a number of order members there. So that's just a little bit about Sugarbha, for those of you who don't know him or have not met him before. So Sugarbha, you write an article in The Fire and Born of Fire and the Void, and I just want to show everyone the image that comes just before that article. The article here is called "A Bomb Planted at the Feet of God." So you can see there, you've got a hand coming out of a cloud being bitten by a snake that's wrapped around a bundle of sticks or fuel, which is in flames. So I wondered if you could just tell us a little bit about what it was like for you, kind of atmosphere of growing up in Mullingar. I'm picking you were born in the early 1970s?
That's correct, yeah. So it was 70s and 80s. I mean, it was very good in many ways. Lots of positive relationships, family, friends, and a sense of community. You know, very friendly, people quite willing to help one another out and, you know, to be involved with each other's lives. So I kind of didn't realize there was that positive element going on until I moved to London and got a bit of a perspective.
Yeah, yeah.
And also later in those early years in London, I really began to appreciate the sense of etiquette and manners that were instilled by my parents. So there was something very, very good in that. But at the same time, there was this tremendous sense of parochialism and very much a sense of, as I recall, that, you know, there was a particular mold you were expected to fit into, and you had to fit into that to be seen as normal or to be seen as doing well, or for the family to hold their respect and esteem. So that was quite oppressive, really.
Yeah, I get the strong impression from talking to you over the years that you weren't entirely happy with that. You didn't want to fit yourself into a mold.
That's right. Yeah, yeah.
But how did you begin to break out of that mold?
I think there was a sense of very, very fortunate in the sense that at secondary school, I made two very good friends, and we're still in touch. In fact, with one of the guys from Mullingar area who lives in Dublin, we were only in touch last week, and they're not involved with Buddhism or True Ratna, but those friendships were really key because, as you know, when you get to 15, 16, you begin to sort of think about things, and it was like the only context I had to discuss issues and work out what I thought. In a way, it was like a mini Sangha, a mini Buddhist community, really. Yeah. So that was the sort of first sense of beginning to get a sense of what I thought about things.
And did music play a part in that process as well for you?
Music played a big part in that because at the time there was a sort of, I would say, there was a sort of air of depression, I would say. Personally, that was my memory of where I grew up, at least in the general area. Yeah. And I didn't really feel as a teenager, 14, 15, 16, that there was a real sense of a way forward in life. That might have been my own personal limitations as well, of course. But so music came along, and it was literally like a key. It was like a key into something of a bigger world. And suddenly, you know, I felt a lot more alive. There was more energy. You could say that my imagination became more activated, I think. You could say that. Yeah. So the music, I got very involved with music, got very involved with playing music and in the music scene, and it was very important.
And what kind of music did you get into? In the zine, you talk about going to the Sound Cellar in Dublin, the bottom of Grafton Street.
That right, that was an amazing place to go. I used to love going there, and in fact, my brother lives in Dublin, and I see him usually, you know, a couple of times a year. But anyway, a few years ago, I went back with an old mate, and we went down, and it was pretty much still the same. It was incredible. But that was that was like a mini pilgrimage, you know, going there to buy this music. getting those old rickety CIE buses up to Dublin, those orange things that thank goodness have gone. But so that was amazing. So that, you know, that was just like a sort of like a sense stepping into a bit of a bigger world as a young lad.
And the way you write about it, it also sounds a little bit like there was a sense of danger or something slightly, I don't know, something to be disapproved of, something
absolutely
a bit bad.
I think there was a sense for me, a little bit like what Alokavira said. You know, I became aware in my mid-teens that I didn't respond to Christianity. I didn't respond to Catholicism. And so I was aware of that. And, you know, I made moves to step out of that. So by the time I was 16, I terribly confused my parents very badly and stepped out of the church. But the music was great because I think I responded strongly just to the raw sounds and to the images, you know, just those amazing sort of images, especially Scandinavian dark metal, you know, tremendous big soundscapes and LP covers with images I'd never seen before in my life. I mean, what
were the images? Because you talk about the LPs as almost becoming almost like something to be venerated. I mean,
I think there like in Buddhism, you know, obviously I'm not sure if everybody watching is a practitioner, but we have our shrines, which are really important. But for me back then, it was like where my heart was, where my energy was in a way. I mean, I can't recall all the album covers, but you know, the big covers.
Is there one that stands out for you? Is there one that?
There is one in the zine. There is one in the zine by a band called Bathory from Sweden, and in a way, it's just a sort of type logo of the name. And I think there's a scene of. It's probably like some sort of painting of heaven and angels, and it's like something that could be from Paradise Lost, some drawing or something like that. So that made quite an impact.
Yeah. And you talk about it as feeling a slight uneasiness about listening to that music.
At first, absolutely.
I'm fascinated by that, yeah. You say more about that?
It was taboo. I mean, I think if my parents knew what I was listening to, they would have been mortified. So, you know, because it was back, I mean, now is innocent enough, but back then, certainly growing up in the Mullingar area, it was very deeply conservative and, you know, quite narrow in some ways. And if you stood out, you really stood out like a sore thumb.
Yeah.
So it was a bit like, at first, I think there was an element for me of irrational guilt around listening to it. And I remember I wouldn't have known that language back at the time, but I had a response of shame or guilt. And I thought, well, why?
Right.
You know, so
how did you, it sounds like in a way, you clocked that. You thought, why this isn't rational? Why should I feel this guilt? So how did you kind of overcome that? You know, because obviously in Buddhism we talk about that, but did you manage to break through that without that language?
Well, that takes a long time. I think. Well, maybe it depends on individuals. Maybe I mean in Buddhism we talk about integration, don't we? We talk about people being whole and knowing themselves and having a perspective. So it might depend on individuals, but certainly. For myself and the background I came from, you know, that took time for me to unpack all of that. So I would say, really, I got involved with Sri Ratna in 1990, and I think probably when I was living and working in a Buddhist context in London in the mid-90s, you know, I remember. Well, it took me 3 years to land and feel I'd integrated and feel I got a sense of English culture. And all of that. So I think it was at that point I began to see, and I think the poetry of Patrick Kavanagh had a big sort of impact in putting my own experience in a sort of context that I could relate to.
Yeah, brilliant. And you later in the zine, towards the end of your piece in the zine, you talk about a couple of pieces from Sangharakshita, the teacher and founder of our order and movement. And one of them is Buddhism and blasphemy. So, I mean, is that something that I mean, interestingly, Bante sort of says that blasphemy might be a kind of necessary, actually performing external acts of blasphemy could actually be an important part of the path. And did you explore that yourself, or was that something that you?
I did when I was when I was living in Mullingar. I mean, it sounds laughable now. It was all very innocent, but it was part of working with that sense of irrational guilt, really. And I can't remember how it works, but I remember writing to some archbishop or some bishop in Ireland who seemed to be quite. Would it be the sort of anyway the sort of head of the church, telling him that I no longer considered myself a Catholic nor wanted to be involved, and that felt like quite an important step to take. I mean, it may sound a bit trivial now, 30 years on or whatever, but in a way there was a working with an internal dialogue around it and getting over a sense of fear and getting over it.
It's also quite a powerful thing to externalize something that's going on in your mind, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And writing.
Absolutely. And another thing was myself and a friend who was involved at the time, we both heard each other's confessions in the local cathedral, which was great. I mean, you can imagine.
On either side of the grill, was it?
That's right, yeah. You can imagine it. But for me, when I was playing the part of the priest, it felt terribly uncomfortable. So, yeah.
Oh, so you're exploring that even back in Mullingar as a teenager?
That was as I first got involved with Tree Rat, and I was probably 19 at the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I hadn't appreciated you got involved so young.
We were actually the first Tree Rat in a group in Ireland, believe it or not, back in 1990, 1989. Who would have thought?
That was with Lalita
Ratna, and we had people like Mangala visited, Sangapala visited before he moved over, many others.
Yeah. So if you got like a sort of a parting, I don't know, encouragement or advice, or because a lot of people who are listening to this will be coming from a similar background to the one that you've come from. I don't know if you've got any.
I think the thing that I've felt in recent years is that it's really, really important to know what you think yourself about things and to really, really think things through. Yeah. And I mean, things have changed so much in Ireland, but certainly from my generation growing up, your identity was very, very, being Irish was very linked in with Catholicism. Now, of course, that's quite different. Yeah. But maybe for people of my generation, certainly, really, really think it over and talk about it, and be conscious about your responses. And if there is a response there, to God or whatever, just talk about it. Don't get defensive, because we in Spain here, maybe there's some comparisons, but certainly in study groups I've had people, and of course one handles it sensitively, but I've had people getting quite defensive around the area of God and stuff like that when it comes up in discussion. So if that's going on for you, just be honest and investigate about that. And finally, there are many good aspects as well. I mean, I'm a huge fan of El Greco, and it's classic Christian painting. I mean, I have no interest in Christianity at all, but I went to Madrid last year for work, and I spent half a day in the gallery, the most part of the time just in the room looking at El Greco's. Images were Christian, but nothing got to do with Christianity.
So what would you say it's got to do with those paintings? It's
got to do with deeper meaning, really. Again, it's a doorway into deeper meaning, and it can unlock maybe deeper understandings and things like that. Yeah, but I think you can only really, as a Buddhist, take advantage of Christian art and culture if you really understand the difference between Buddhism and Christianity. And that's why I mentioned the book From Genesis to the Diamond Sutra, because I would say that's really essential reading, just to get a good critique. And I mean, Bhante was a great, really deeply appreciated aspects of Christian art, as we know.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks very much, Sugarbha. Really, really good to get your just your experience actually, and your thoughts about this whole area. You'll find out later on how to get a copy of the zine, and you can read Sugarbha's piece in the zine about planting a bomb at the feet of God.
Thanks, Jnanadhara.
Great, yeah. So I want to invite Aryapala to join us now. So I've known Aryapala actually the longest. If I might be a little bit personal, I met Sugarbha, Aryapala, I think probably about more than 20 years ago over in New Zealand. And Aryapala is originally from Melbourne in Australia, I believe. It's a bit more complex than that, but that's where he lived most of his early years. And he got involved in Buddhism in England in the mid-90s. And that's where he met Sugarbha, I believe. And I know Aryapala had a long interest in the occult and Wicca and so on, which we make it into. And he was ordained, actually, Sugarbha and Aryapala and I were all at Gukaloka, a retreat centre for men in Spain, where Aryapala was ordained a bit before then, but we're all on that retreat together. And Aryapala's name means one who defends spiritual excellence or spiritual qualities. And as we've heard from Alokavira, he was involved in collaboration on the Pamaloka programs over quite a number of years and pioneered a new kind of language, a new language of images for those programs, which had quite a big impact. And Aryapala was really deeply involved with Pamaloka over quite a number of years and was the chair of Pamaloka for quite a number of years. So a real leading role. He's recently, I'm not sure we'll have a chance to talk about this. We'll have to maybe get you back, Aryapala, but he's recently been on pilgrimage to Japan. He's actually been twice over the last 3 years or so. He tells me he's visited 88 temples in Japan. And he's now living actually, he's just down the hall from Sugarbha in Barcelona. They're living together in Barcelona. I've just got a computer issue here. Anyway, welcome Aryapala, really good to have you.
Hi, thanks Jnanadhara, thanks for having me.
Yeah,
what
yeah.
A great thing.
I've just got to show everyone this image that it's an image of you, but it might not be immediately apparent. This is from the zine.
Yeah.
So do you want to say a little bit about that image?
Oh, look at that little fella. That's me and my sister. That's me and my sister. That Alokavira cropped onto a picture of, I think it's from one of those sort of spoof penguin books, like children in the occult pray. And he just, I think I asked him to drop me and my sister's heads on them and put a tattoo on my sister's shoulder, which is Aryapala in Japanese kanji.
Oh, is that what that is? Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, you've got somewhere. Let me just see now in the book. I should have actually put it on. You've got worship, also in Japanese and English, from puja.
Yes. Yeah, the worship section from the threefold puja, devotion towards the Buddha, his teaching, and his community, which dropped in.
Yeah, and then over the page, you've got actually just before that. You've got instructions on how to follow our cult.
Oh yeah, that was Alokavira, not me.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful. And then you flick over, and I immediately knew that was you. I must have seen a picture of you as a wee boy. Anyway, I just wanted to show that because it's rather a wonderful image.
That's probably me in New Zealand. I spent.
You grew up in Brighton for a bit, didn't you?
Yeah, about 3 years just outside in Whitby. Yeah,
Whitby, that's right. I remember that now. I knew there was some. It wasn't as straightforward as Melbourne, Australia.
we can actually know. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
one of your contributions, Aryapala, to the zine is both a piece on the 4 sites, old age, sickness, and death, and then also a video. I thought what we could do is I played the video. It's about 6 or 7 minutes long, and then I'll just ask you about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you want to do that.
Yeah. And just, you might recognize the voice on the video. The narrator is Pavara.
Yeah, we needed Pavara. Yeah.
Who also tuned in. So
We really need subtitles for the non-Irish, I think.
so let's see if this works now. Okay.
The Foresight story recounts 4 tremendously significant episodes relating to the Buddha before he was enlightened, and that were to inform the course of his life. His gut recognition of the inescapable aspects of the human condition, his spiritual crisis or turning point when he sees old age, sickness, death, and a wanderer. The Foresights summarize or even crystallize in a very powerful form certain fundamental teachings of Buddhism and cast a great deal of light on the Buddha's own early inner spiritual development. He called them divine messengers who tell human beings something vitally important about their state. The first sight, an old person. Sometimes we see something as though for the first time. In a sense, we've seen it 1,000 times. But one day a moment comes or strikes when we see it as though for the first time. Why is he so faint and frail? How does she get like that? It will happen even to you. One day you will be old. What then is the use of this youth and vitality if it ends like this? Old age it is called, that which has broken him and her down, the murderer of beauty, the ruin of vigour, the birthplace of sorrow, the grave of pleasure, the destroyer of memory, the enemy of the senses, brokenness of teeth, greyness of hair, wrinkling of skin, decline of life, weakness of faculties. I spit on you, old age that makes for ugliness. The bodily image, so charming, is trampled by old age. Even those who have lived 100 are headed all to an end in death, which spares no one, which tramples all. The second sight, a sick and diseased person. All are subject to sickness at various times. As healthy as we are, we will be struck down by sickness at some time. The world sees it, but feels no alarm at all. We don't want to grow old, but we can't help it. We don't want to fall sick, but we can't help it. We don't want to die, but we can't help it. Enduring bodily feelings that are painful, fierce, sharp, racking, repellent, disagreeable, life-threatening. Cleaning up excrement, urine, saliva or vomit. I'm sure to become ill. I can't avoid illness. Really noticing this, the healthy person's intoxication with health will entirely drop away. The third sight, a dead body. Usually we don't see corpses. We're put in a box and dropped in the ground, or put in this incinerator and burned. We will realize this will happen to us one day. An existential crisis will arise. We can't escape it. Destruction is inevitable for all in the world, be they of low, middle or high status. Death, passing away, dissolution, disappearance, dying, completion of time, dissolution of the aggregates, laying down of the body. Not up in the air, nor in the middle of the sea, nor going into a cleft in the mountains. Nowhere on earth is a spot to be found where you can stay and not succumb to death. What is it all about? All this running around, seeking pleasure, pushing away what you don't want. People flopping around like fish in water that is too shallow. What on earth is it that people spend all their time doing? Life isn't meaningless. It's not the whim of some capricious being. It's no whim, not haphazard. Human experience, according to Buddhism, shows the way things flow together and helps us come to terms with our situation. we can create a new vision of how we understand things and how we can act creatively in relation to it. A life of significance, a life of trying to be awake. In this way, the Buddha was brought up against these existential situations of life and death, and he thought about them very, very deeply. But he saw a fourth sight. He saw a person who seemed to be at peace with his situation. The fourth sight. A wanderer, a holy person. While there is suffering, there is also love, compassion, and generosity. A life dedicated to easing the suffering of others in the world, where people are trying to ease the sickness and suffering of others. The opportunity for a spiritual life, not just the fear that is sparked by old age, sickness, and death, not to recoil from them. And so the Buddha offers another way of being. We try and live in a different way. We try and live with kindness, always responding creatively, no matter what is thrown at us. Always love and connection. It means that someone is trying to really make something of their life. The Buddha goes on to explain how to train the mind and cultivate happiness and care for others. But the Buddha is only the shower of the way. It is up to the individual to follow that way, to decide whether he or she is going to follow that way or not. This attitude shows tremendous respect for the individual. It shows great confidence in the potential of the individual. It shows an appreciation of the fact that the individual cannot be forced. You must want to change. You must want to develop. All that one can do is show an example, encourage, and, if one can, inspire. As a fletcher straightens an arrow, so the person of understanding makes straight the trembling, unsteady mind, which is difficult to guard and difficult to restrain. A trained mind brings happiness.
Brilliant.
Wow, what a blast.
It is a bit of a blast, yeah. It's quite.
Yeah.
I watched it this afternoon. I hadn't seen it for quite a while, and
Likewise.
yeah, it's some quite strong images in it.
Yeah, sorry, it's a bit jumpy. It's a bit distracting in a way, but then there you go.
Well, in a way, it's a bit like a bit of an assault. But what's really striking about it is there's no sense of euphemism. There's no sense. Even you can so easy to say old age, sickness, and death, isn't it? But was that what you were trying to achieve with the video? Like, what was the? Because it's communicating the foresights in a different kind of a way.
Yeah, a lot of friends were giving talks around the time of lockdown from March onwards, and it inspired me. And just as a sort of personal project, I started taking images, footage of around this area. Me and Sugarbha live in. It's really rough, and we live on a very infamous street. And I suppose it was a practice for me as well to be doing that. And I've always enjoyed the moving image, and so I thought that would be a good way to, get something done. And then the zine seemed like that could be an offering for my friends, and maybe it could, I don't know, be interesting and spark thinking off.
I mean, it just reminded me, like watching that the zine came out back when things were much more up in the air, and COVID-19 was a new, very frightening reality for everybody. And maybe that was one of the things that shocked me about seeing those images again, was I'd become accustomed to it.
Yep.
I mean, do you think that's a kind of a danger with, that we just become a bit, well, I mean, Alokavira talked about it earlier, a bit complacent or a bit.
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. And it is, I mean, the new normal, people go about their life. There's a global pandemic going on, but it is easy to forget and just to go about business with a mask on and, wash your hands and everything, because you don't see anything. So we're not seeing, well, unless you watch a lot of news, you won't see people in the hospital necessarily, or I don't know if people are taken away in the dead of night, if they've, gotten sick down the lane, I don't know. Don't see a lot.
And how do you, like, is that a conscious part of the way you're living at the moment, or trying to kind of keep that in mind, or how would you do that if you?
Well, it's easy. Yeah, it's easy to become complacent. So it's good to be reminded that if you don't wash your hands, you could get really sick. If you're just a little bit complacent, it's very easy to also spread a deadly virus.
Yeah.
So.
And it's not all that. I mean, you know, like those images are really strong. You know, particularly the images of death, and you see a corpse being incinerated, for example. But you also have this image of the Buddha. So I wonder, that seems to be really, really crucially important, because I remember when I first watched that video, I was like, yeah, but there is the Buddha, and then when the Buddha came, there was a sense.
Well, I was thinking about that earlier because I knew you'd been interviewing us. So, but I remember when I lived semi-monastic at Pamaloka, I had a good friend who would walk around saying, "What's it all about?" Just every day, it'd be really annoying. What's it all about? Why, basically, why are we doing what we're doing? Why be Buddhist? Why practice? And it got really annoying. His name's Saraha, a dear friend. And you can imagine Sarah, what's it all about? And one day he said, compassion. If there's more compassion in the world, isn't that great? That's what it's about, really, isn't it? And I was like, thank goodness for that. You got somewhere, and it was great. It was a great sort of practice of questioning, and life was difficult for Saraha, and life is difficult for a lot of us, and there is an alternative. There was the fourth sight in the story, the gut recognition of our mortality, when the Buddha-to-be came across a holy person who was living a complete alternative to what everyone else was doing. So it's like, well, what's that about? So that was the beginning of his kind of path, the sort of curiosity of there could be more to life than this, but birth, school, work, death. So
and one of the other things about that video, the foresight, is a lot of pictures of people that I know are your friends that seem to feature really, really strongly. Because I mean, it's I suppose what I'm saying is, it's not just the Buddha, is it? Like, you've got your friends.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. Yep.
So living and Surita and Padmavajra and lots of other.
They're just great. They're just great examples of human individuals, just human potential, and they're just so kind and continue to, give of themselves, like giving talks and lectures and helping people out. It's just amazing. So they're my real heroes. So they're the examples, really, for me in my life. The exemplars.
Yeah. So it's both. The piece sort of seems kind of both universal and quite, in a way, quite sort of personal.
Yeah. So we've got the ideal of the Buddha, but there's these. The founder of our order, Sangharakshita, always used to talk about the esoteric refuges. So the Buddha, in the sense of our ideal, we see that in the living person, the living personages. You see that in the everyday person. So we've got examples, and thank goodness for that. Yeah. There are people who are living the example, and not just in our order, but in other places. So,
Well, thanks very much, Aryapala. Again, sorry I would have liked to talk to you for longer.
Yeah, no, you're welcome. Good. Thanks heaps for doing this. This is what the zine's all about, actually, hanging out with friends and being able to talk about our lives, so and aspects of it. So, yeah, it's great. Thank you.
Yeah, no, well, that's one of the things that really comes out in the zine, actually. That's what it feels like. It feels like a collaboration between friends, which feels so much part of the kind of spirit of our order and our community.
Yeah, that was the reason. It was just a bit strange that it became public, but yeah.
Well, it's public. and speaking of friends, maybe we can have Alokavira and Sugarbha back again. Hi, guys. And so maybe, yeah, I just wanted to, yeah, just basically, so how would people, well, actually, firstly, what are your future plans? So this is, we've got an issue 1. So is there plans for an issue 2, Alokavira?
Well, yeah, 2, 3 are planned. 30th of November, full moon is number 2.
Okay.
Number 3 is the March full moon, which I don't remember what date that is, but yeah. So.
And what can we expect to see? Any little teasers?
Well, so far there's Fudo in a cave with loads of children praying. There's also your husband in the tent.
Quite strongly.
Hey?
You'll have to tell us a bit about Fudo.
So Fudo, or Achala, is a bodhisattva, but a rather wrathful bodhisattva with a kind of distorted face and demonic teeth, an aura of flames behind him. And well, actually, both Aryapala and I are doing a meditation practice around him. So he's featured. I did it with the first collage. But otherwise, I mean, we have a piece from Pavara where he's in his underpants, a picture. I won't give away any on the text yet, but there might be swimming trunks I couldn't see in detail.
Togs, yeah, it's in his togs.
And if people want to get a copy, I don't know how many copies are circulating of this issue 1, but Aryapala, how could people get a copy of Fire in the Void if they wanted to get a copy?
Bigcartel.com, is that right, Alokavira?
Hey.
There's bigcartel.com and search Born of the Fire and the Void. I think we're running out, but that'll be all right.
Yeah. And you can also get in touch online as well. I think you've got some online presences.
Well, that's the Born of Fire and the Void, Big Cartel, and then we have an Instagram which has the same name.
Oh yeah,
thanks, Daniel.
Daniel's just posted it in the chat if you want to link from the chat.
Yeah.
So just before we finish, we're scheduled to finish, but just any last thoughts, anything you want to say to everybody?
Yes.
Yeah, Sugarbha.
Yes, I'd like to say that we want to continue on doing the zine, but it does cost money. And I used to work as a salesman, as you probably remember. But if Alokavira's produced, you probably can't really see it so well, but these amazing T-shirts, but they're on our Big Cartel shop, which you can access, as Aryapala said, or I believe, if you go onto the Instagram account. So if you want to support us to keep publishing, that would be great.
Fantastic. And details are on your social media and yeah, fantastic.
Well, yeah, shortly. Currently the link is to this event, but once we hung up, I will change it back.
Yeah, fantastic. And anything, Alokavira, anything that you want to add?
Just thank you. And as Aryapala said, it has been, the connection, the friendship that has been great between Aryapala, Sugarbha, Pavara, Paraga, and Tarapalita. So that's how many are we? 6?
Yeah.
Or 7?
Yeah, brilliant.
My math is bad.
Are you looking for other contributors? I know Akasa Matthew's name was mentioned.
Yeah, kind of, yeah. But also, like, it's good if people, get together and share their interests with one another as well. That's basically what we've done, and we're just kind of like-minded. So I'm sure, people in the Sangha got really diverse interests. It's really important to follow them up because there's energy in there, and that's what sort of this is all about. There's finding as Subhuti talks about in his talks, the eros. There's an energy, there's a spark of interest, and that's got a reflection of something more. So yeah, really follow that up.
And it sounds like what you've done is followed it up with each other, and this is where this seems.
Yeah. 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 We thought other people might be interested. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Well, other people are, which,
Yeah.
So anyway, lads, Alokavira, Sugarbha, Aryapala, thanks so much for joining us for Culture Night. And this has all been recorded, so hopefully some other people might see it. And I'm really looking forward to seeing Zine number 2, and maybe we can have you back for maybe a longer delve into whatever it is that you come up with. So yeah, thanks very much. And
Thanks everyone.
Thank you.